What are the modalities do you think are good? And when you say psychotherapy, you mean in the classic sense? I sit down, I talk about my problems.
Sure.
Okay.
I sit down with another human, I plug my brain into another brain, and I basically take the spirit level. I check out whether the way I look at things is really fair and good and the right way of looking at things. And I think very often when people go into psychotherapy, they start questioning stuff because, people will say, I'm in a relationship and, I don't know, we never hug. And that's normal. And maybe a psychotherapist goes, do you like that? Is that a good thing? And the person goes, no, I hate that. And they go, well, is that normal? Sure, it's been normal for 20 years. And the person goes, well, but do you want it to be normal? And suddenly you start to ask a question, And so patterns of being unhappy that we've locked ourselves into get questioned. And psychotherapy done well should be a journey of liberation. We should have a lot more options. One way of looking at unhappiness is people who are in one way or another in a tunnel. They say, the only way to live is this way. They're not happy with it, but it seems the only way. I've got to love this person, though it's not making me happy. I've got to do this job, though it's a prison. I've got to live in this place, though I don't like it. And, we can unpick some of those things and say, really, is that absolutely necessary? Where human beings are brilliant at building themselves cages and throwing away the key. Those cages, this is the great insight of existentialism. Existentialism, in its essence, is an attempt to say human beings are born free and manage to enslave themselves. And that process of enslavement is what existentialists study. All the different ways in which we say that X or Y is necessary when in fact it isn't. And
some say there's no key. We're just in the cage, the door's open, and we just sit there.
Absolutely. I mean, largely because, think of our upbringing. We grow up very slowly. We're not really adults till we're 20 or more. And we grow up all of us, in some very constrained environments. We are taught to be good boys and girls. We are taught that, there are procedures to jump through. It takes a long while and a lot of courage to imagine that doing the slightly unexpected thing might be viable for you. To be a mature human being requires such a fine balance between compliance and liberation. Too much liberation, and you end up, the kid who leaves school at 16 without the right skills, without the right experience, without the right basis, who has to rebel all the time against everybody and who can't achieve because they're in a permanent fight against authority. On the other hand, to swallow everything that authority tells you, that's not going to be a recipe for disaster as well. If you do everything that the powers that be expect you to be and do, you will end up in trouble, oddly. A particular kind of trouble. The trouble that ends up when you're inwardly dead, even though outwardly, in inverted commas, successful.
This is the super pleaser.
The super pleaser.
Okay.
We hear so much about rebels. We don't hear enough about the people pleasers, who are, in a way, in a far more dangerous spot. They're also far more numerous. People who haven't found a sensible way to say a gentle no to certain of the things that society and life proposes to us that will actually kill us slowly, but definitely, if we accept it.
Other modalities to examine your own psyche, do you think about things like meditation, breath work, cold therapy, exercise, psychedelics? Because all of these can give you a different view on your brain, usually without another human involved. How do you feel about those? Because I've had experience with all of those in the last 3 years, and I've gotten a lot of insight from them. Sometimes it takes me years to process that insight.
Look, I think that we can say that lots and lots of things enable us to gain insight into ourselves, superior to that which we would gain if we simply went about our ordinary life. Some of those things are called art. Reading a certain kind of book opens your mind in ways that you would just never have known. A certain kind of book that will blow your mind. And I'm using the word often used around drugs for good measure, because literally the experiences that people on psychedelics might report around, a magic mushroom could be available around the paintings of Rubens or Titian or Picasso or others.
It could be.
It could be. So I think that the word drugs deserves to be expanded to encompass magic mushrooms for sure, a certain kind of breath work for sure, that is also a drug. But it could also include, a certain kind of Swiss Alpine cheese, or pomegranate juice, or the paintings of Caspar David Friedrich. All of these things function as tools to open up areas of perception and self-awareness that might not be available in, so-called normal life.
And you're for all of that, or you're for anything that gives you that new perspective.
Yes, and I'm for imaginative relationships to it. So, I remember as a student reading about the Dionysic festivals of ancient Athens. The notion that the ancient Athenians, around the beginning of March, would regularly open the doors of the city, get extremely drunk, and go dancing, and enter a kind of ecstatic state of dance in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine, drinking, debauchery, chaos, but also of sanity understood in its broader sense. We need to go a little crazy in order to remain sane. In the medieval times, there was the famous Feast of Fools, where for one day of the year, society would be turned upside down, and the fool would become the wise person, and the wise person would become the fool. That is the correct order. The kind of reversal of order is in itself a correct order. And I think that in a modern society, unfortunately, too often, people who want to open our minds to different ways of thinking and feeling have been put in a box called spirituality, called hippies, called drug takers, and those labels have alienated the rest of respectable society from taking a look. Because people go like, I'm not a druggie, or I'm not a hippie, or I don't do that weird Eastern stuff, right? And I understand that those kind of labels and that sometimes the fear and apprehension that lies behind it. And sometimes the advocates of these slightly different ways of thinking about life don't make friends for themselves. They don't make it easy for the rest of us, because they present their wares in ways that are designed to really frighten and alienate, a busy doctor, or a sensible geography teacher facing middle age, or many of the kind of people who belong to ordinary society are unjustifiably put off by these different ways of thinking and feeling. So look, there's no doubt that what you eat, what you drink, how you stand, how you sit, how you breathe, the chemical constituents of your blood, all these things have a real impact on how you think, how you love, how you view your life, etc. And by making certain adjustments, you can definitely have a mentality that is more suited to where you want to go in life. And so by all means, we should, all of us, keep an open mind about many of these things. For many of us, paying greater attention to our posture might be very good. Paying greater attention to the rhythm and the rate at which we're breathing might be very worthwhile. For some of us, maybe the magic mushroom road might be the road to go. For some of us, it'll be psychotherapy. All these things belong to a more generous sense of how our minds work. Our minds are not merely cool, calm, rational organs that are operating on data from right now. These are ancestral machines that are bathing in their own history, that are driven by fears and appetites formed in a past we could hardly remember, we could hardly put words to. We are driven by chemicals, by the air we're taking in. And all of this is part of what it means to be a thinking, sentient being. So if you're in the thinking space, sure, take an interest in it. And I definitely do.